It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. And we're back once again doing another podcast. Hi, podcasters. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Els Tahura.
Hi, I'm Chad Jetner.
I'm Peter Lawrence.
And I'm Kyle Bacher. And today we're going to talk about doing agile stuff as developers and people like that. Doing agile when the business might not be ready for it, when the business might still live in a classic waterfall world where they're used to coming in at the end and seeing the finished result versus being involved early on. So how do you help the business make that transition and onboard the business into the new world of how we're doing projects where we're building bits and pieces along the way?
Well, you start with a manifesto.
That means
Now
you mean
they're
business.
listening. Yeah. That's a buzzword that gets
No, there literally is an agile manifesto created in 2001. Don't recommend showing that to the folks from your business immediately, but it's actually like relatively straightforward stuff, right? Like I think it's been around so long now that, I mean, Peter, Elle, and I probably just take it for granted. Like, of course, that's how you do things. Like, what else would you do?
Every day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we're none of us are Scrum Masters. We come at things differently. I was sort of a, the guy you just chuck in by himself and tell him what you want and have him scramble and figure it out.
Do we call that a soloist, or what do we call that?
I like the term gunslinger. I go in and I clean up the town and I leave. No, it's like a solo act. Yeah, one-man band, a Swiss Army knife. Then we have classical, like, development people that are now doing full-blown agile and Scrum and things like that. And then we have our data expert. I don't know what she does.
Looking around over my shoulder. Yeah.
She comes up with really short field names that use underscores and.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, it's important to name all of your database tables and collections with like emoji characters.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like
so
that.
She's got that dialed in. Yeah. So Chad, you're trucking along on a project right now, doing
Yes.
agile and stuff like that. Have you run into any types of situations that, like, you wouldn't have? Like, I think because now we're farther along. This used to be a bigger deal when we were just starting out doing agile. So have you run anything that kind of reminds you of? No,
Days of yore.
the days of the past.
I'm going to say no, because I still run into this time to time, and in places where the business is like, all right, we need this product. We need it in 9 months.
Yeah.
Go. Right. We know exactly what we want. We've listed out in 12 bullet points, each having half a dozen words, maybe more, and 9 months. Go.
Somebody posted this joke on our Slack channel where it's a lot of traditional software projects are managed where, like, you set a wedding date, right? And you get all of the metadata around that set. And then you're like, all right, now I'm going to ask the girl out for a first date, right?
Yeah.
So the wedding date is set. You haven't asked her out yet. That's what Peter's talking about. And that's kind of what we fight against a little. Well, not really fight, but that's what we try to push ourselves away from, is that traditional. And that's very waterfall, right? Like, you get, you do still run into folks that are like, oh, here's the day that we need it by. Let's work our way back from there.
Right.
Which honestly, if you're not a career software developer professional, if you're not in the industry, it doesn't seem like a horrible way to do it. Like, oh, okay, I need to deliver, I need to be in production a year from today. Let's figure out all the stuff back that makes that happen. Instead of the agile way of like, yeah, there's roadmaps and there's some of those project artifacts, but we iterate. And the iterate part of our modern practices does not always seem to resonate well with folks from the business. Does that make sense?
From the traditional side, right? Like they're like, well, I thought according to my Gantt chart, we would have this feature done by this particular day, and you guys decided not to start with that feature because you thought this other one made more sense and laid the groundwork for these other things because you're doing it agilely, and at least that's what you're calling it, right? And that's kind of me quoting the business folks there, is that you need to work on setting the expectations. You need to work with them, get them involved in the process as early as possible. And I don't recall if the manifesto like calls out to that, but I know it. The ideal agile world is have everybody all in the same room all the time, going through all the things, and not like having a meeting once every 3 months to decide how far you've gotten or something like that.
Yeah, you have the business along for the ride consistently, giving constant feedback, giving constant input into the process, and not like, oh, okay. I mean, I'm trying to imagine like the last few projects I've been on, if it was like waterfall, right, where you define all the requirements up front, and then you say, all right, go off and build. Right? I mean, I'm way oversimplifying the whole thing. I know there was, some guardrails there, but that's in a nutshell. It's design, go build.
Right.
If you've made fundamental mistakes in your design or in any of that process, the opportunity to get feedback on that just doesn't really exist in that framework. Whereas with Agile, we can make a lot of assumptions about a lot of things, try it out, see what happens, get feedback consistently, constantly, and then also show progress, right? Like we can show folks working code frequently, and it might not be transformational. It might not be like here's a fully fleshed out feature, but it's like, all right, here's what this page is going to look like. Here's where all the buttons are. If you touch them, they don't do anything yet, but can you guys live with this design? All right, cool. Now we're going to start wiring things in under the covers.
Right. And the great part about that is you see like you don't have foundational mistakes, like especially UI or whatever related, that have carried through the design in 20 or 30 different parts and come back with the business at the end and they say, no, that's not what we meant by that. Like, yeah. But we spelled it out right here. It's these are the words. This piece of code represents these words, and you agree to that, right? So it's nice to get those micro corrections all the way through rather than one big giant correction at the end, or even we've talked with UX folks too, and that also is part of this process, right? You can see some of the UX things work or fail quickly. Fail fast, right? That's the motto.
Yeah, fail often and fast. And I've dealt with organizations that try to do both, right? They have an old school project manager from, waterfall days thrown into an agile process, and you just it gets a little chaotic-ish, right? Like you're trying to fit agile, capabilities into a Gantt chart, which you can do. I mean, which isn't, unreasonable, right? Like at some point the business wants to know, when can we reasonably expect this thing to be out there, right? You can't just say, we're agile. Who knows, right?
We'll get there when we get there.
Yeah. But doing what we do now, Peter, is like, they don't have that question as often because they'll see, oh, you did this little part of it. Okay, I get what that is. Now I get what that is. And then explaining some of the ephemeral stuff, like, well, not ephemeral, but like some of the underpinnings of some of this stuff is harder. Like the miscellaneous stuff, the commoditized IT infrastructure that goes along with building a product today. That stuff isn't as easy to translate for the business, like still stuff that needs to happen. I'm gonna talk about like SSO and messaging and all of the middleware stuff and all those things. It's easy for me to demo a screen and a product and something that's visual that users can go out there and start to play with, right?
Right.
It's not as easy for me to get them excited about, hey, we've refactored blah, and now, it's a lot easier for us to develop, X, Y, and Z.
Our SSO implementation is perfectly aligned with our Active Directory. This is so awesome, you guys. Like, what does that mean? Well, you can sign on with your username and password. Oh, great. Well, we expected that. All right, moving on.
Yeah, that's why I talk about like commodity IT things. Nobody gets excited about anymore, right? Like, oh, I can use this role, and I see this, and I see this. Nobody cares anymore.
Right.
And then for me, as a guy with, more than a touch of OCD, refactoring is I get excited about, right? Like a lot. Hey, we reorganized our package structure, right? The way that I'm like, and like, so now all the domain objects are here, the DTOs are here, our services are over here, and they're organized by function, and everybody's like, I can tell you're excited. I actually did demo this recently. Somebody's like, I could tell you're really excited about it, which makes me excited about it. But like, also, can you tell us why this matters?
Right.
And I was like, well, it matters to me. And
so do you have the same like business users, the same people like throughout the entire thing? And you're just, you're just going to lose some of them.
I think it depends on what you're building, right? Like we had Melanie on recently, and the impression I got was, she was building a lot of publicly facing tools, applications, interfaces. What I've been doing lately is a lot of internal applications. And with those, the audience does okay. There are key stakeholders that I always try to invite to every demo, to every event prescribed by the agile process. Those guys are a relative constant, hopefully, right? Those are the guys like signing the checks for us, kind of the guys that brought us in, right? And then there's other folks that audience for me does kind of change. Like I have a core group of users that I know are going to want to see everything. But then there's different, well, Melanie doesn't enjoy this, but I do, the personas, right? I'm going to show a different group of users different features based on how it affects their day. And I'll probably demo it mildly differently to different groups. There'll be a different approach to how I explain, what's going on and how much detail I go into about those things.
So, what do you have to do to prepare those people for what they're about to experience?
I don't know. I don't prepare folks for much, right? Like the first time that they're involved in this process, if they haven't been before, it's weird for them, right? And after a couple of demos, we talked about this last week, but after a couple of demos, you kind of learn and you tailor your demo style to the questions you get in the first couple. So like, one of the things that I struggle with is sometimes, we'll demo a feature or we'll demo a screen. Folks will get fixated on a specific data element, right? They're like, oh, that doesn't look like my business. Okay, sorry. Like we're guessing on the data. Don't look at that. So one of the things I do now I don't necessarily prepare the users for this, but I prepare my demonstration for, oh, these guys hyper-focused on this little thing last time. I want their attention over here. So I'm going to make sure that one tiny little thing, even though I know it doesn't really matter, well, it doesn't matter to me, I'm going to make sure that it matters, that it's displaying or doing something that makes sense to them.
It's accurate, right?
Yeah, because, I don't know. Elle, you've done demos before, even with, you know, your role, right? Like, I think last week you've said kind of the same things. Like, people get fixated on one wrong thing, and then it's just like a bugaboo in their head that they can't let go of.
Yeah, either it's fixing on one wrong thing, or it's getting people used to the idea of seeing, here's a part of something that is working. The whole might, like, if we're kind of going back to that idea of when an agile technical team meets a more waterfall business team or project management team, you have two different groups that are coming to the table with two different sets of expectations. And so it's, okay, how do I help the business team? Because my goal would be to help the business team get comfortable with this agile process, because I would rather not have a deadline and work backwards with, here are the exact dates that these need to be done, and we're only going to check in, at the dress rehearsal, essentially.
Right.
So understanding if what I've found is that, like, for example, when I've done demos around specific team reporting, for example, we want new reporting, something that isn't manually shuffled around in Excel or in an email string, which I've also seen is horrifying. But getting them comfortable with the idea that, okay, you need a report or a series of reports. We're going to be checking in regularly, instead of just me going dark for 2 months and coming back to you with something that might match what you're hoping for, but that it's actually in your best interest to kind of see how I'm progressing, because then they start to have that comfort with, okay, I'm starting to see incremental progress from week to week. It's not that I'm saying, well, it's not done yet, but are you okay with partial homework? Like, that it's more about, okay, we're building this relationship, we're building this level of trust so that you can feel more connected to the final product. Because what I've seen is sometimes the business teams or the project management teams, they are so tied to the very detailed Gantt chart, or they're very tied to, we created the requirements document 6 months ago, you're not following that to the letter, something must be wrong. That is sometimes a knee-jerk reaction of, these are just two teams that don't work well together. They don't have that trust between them. And so is there a way that we can help move towards more agile process and a better relationship just by, let's talk more. let's
Right.
let the project people, the project team, the business team get a better sense of ownership over this product, instead of just saying, here's the stuff you need to do. My boss only cares that it's done by this date, and so I'm gonna clutch that date with every fiber of my being. It's a process, but I think, and we talked about this with demos too, in the past, is it's so much about just having that trust. And if there's trust between, two people or two teams or whatever it is, that generally makes people more open to, okay, we'll try a slightly different process. I will unclench my fist from the Gantt chart, or on the technical side, I will loosen up about understanding that, okay, maybe these business users need really nice mocked data for the demo. That, okay, that's not important to me, but it's important to you. And so I'm going to take the time to do that so that we are regularly meeting in the middle and making progress together.
Even though your mock data is hilarious.
Yeah. I'm yeah.
It just doesn't look right to them because it's not their business. I look at this from my world is taking people to an iterative approach versus just hand it in. Here's a deliverable, hand it over. And the process of iterating through gives you course corrections along the way. They might not want to take that approach of it, just do it. I'll take a look at it and tell you if it's right. And it's like, well, if we do that at the point you want to, I've already done all the work and now I have to do rework.
And you have no budget for that. And
right. But if we can just check in on this and you tell me that it's going in the direction you want, then we'll get there. It's like it's easier to sketch something out where you can, change your lines and move things around than just drawing like one line all the way through.
Well, I know we've talked about SharePoint in the past and that it's your bailiwick, obviously. Has it always lent itself sort of to this agile, like we'll try some things, we'll see what happens, and I'll show you? Or
it was pushed into it, strong-armed, cajoled. It was taken there because, okay, now we got to come back, and the next iteration will be because the last iteration didn't work the way we thought it was going to. What if we did it this way? It's almost like you're proposing the changes to the business because you're working with a tool that you configure, not one that you just build from scratch. You're not in the code. You don't have that capability. So it's like, okay, I can give you what you want, but it's going to be slightly different than how you wanted it to be.
Right.
Is this okay?
Yeah.
And then if it's not, then you have a whole nother problem on your hands.
But at least you know it early on and fail fast, right? Like we've said.
Yeah. And one of my early consulting blunders was that I couldn't say no. I'm like, well, let me go check some more, try some more. Like, it's straightforward. It doesn't work that way, period. But let me go back and try to find some magic somewhere. And then
it's well documented.
Scrounging, and then taking it personally. Like this failure of the system is my failure. And if I can't make this do everything they want the way they want to do it, then I failed. And it's not like that. It's like we just need to figure out how we can make this work. And maybe there's a point early on where we figure out that it's not the right thing. It's like what you're talking about is really a custom front end that could be done in JavaScript and jQuery by a developer, and it would take a few days, and it'll bring all the data in, and you can use it, for your content management piece. But the front end isn't going to look like this. It's not going to be standard.
Right.
So that's been the approach, but it's that learning curve, as you go along with tools like that. And it's gotten better and better, and I think smarter in the way they've implemented it, letting you do less customization in some ways, but then giving you a framework to do more custom stuff. So it's like you can't get yourself into trouble if you're a super user that's really good at just laying out pages and stuff using the tools. But the old versions, you could pull something away from its template and make changes to it. And if you realized how much that was going to hurt during your migration. You never would have done it. So they've, and I think some of that came along when they had to do more support for their own products when things were in the cloud. They're like, we need to make these things easier for us to support so they can't have as many problems as they used to. And I don't know if that's true or not, but so I always had that where I'm iterating,
Right.
but really don't
Involving
have a
the
choice.
business.
But I've also had to be the BA, the PM, they just expected me to come in and be the guy and do it all. So, then it's like, okay, involve it, finding my champions to work with and my stakeholders and all that stuff. And then, you're just figuring out how to work with them. And then you get there and you hit a stride and things go pretty well. But I don't think it's hard for people to change to an iterative approach if you bring them into it. If you just kind of expect them to catch up and keep up, it might not be as easy a transition.
I will agree and disagree with that, because sometimes people are really driven by dates.
Some people are driven by being forced to do things and baptism by fire.
Yep.
Well, some people are driven by dates, but that's usually driven by budget, right? Like, you can't just have a product team around forever, right? Like, you need to know how much money, what's it going to cost? And usually what's it going to cost ties directly to how long is it going to take. And I don't I honestly don't fault that at all, right? Like, I get it that the agile process lends itself to less, like, more wishy-washy end dates.
It works better in a non-consulting, non-dollar-driven environment, right?
Non-regulatory.
Yeah, non-regulatory. That too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you're on a project, whatever your role is, you all kind of do some additional lifting and support in other areas. You're part of things. So as developers, you might have a Scrum master and a whole like project management team outside of yourself as the tech lead or the developer. So what is your, like, how do you see your role in that? Like, when you're just part of the development team, your role in helping that kind of get the business on board and make sure that you're not losing them, blowing them away with stuff that they don't want to see.
It depends on the business, really. It's kind of a crappy answer, but it depends on how, one, have they done this before, right? Have they been part of this? If they haven't, depending on the quality of your Scrum Master, depending on the quality of the rest of the team and their capabilities, you step in, or we step in, or I step in, wherever it makes the most sense. I mean, I understand fairly well Agile, the process, the ceremonies. I'm not as ritualistic about it as some folks are. So, especially for an organization that's literally brand new to it, I don't try to get them to buy into literally every single little ceremony that we have, right? Like, we just kind of dip your toe in the water, right? Like, I let them know, listen, the dev team, we're going to do daily stand-ups, right? We're going to hang out. It's going to be pretty detailed. Listen in if you want, right? But this isn't for you. This is for us. Should be developers. Our product owner would ideally make time for this. QA, everybody part of that process. But then, like, other things, backlog grooming and sprint planning and the entire sprint event, like, all of that stuff, I would sure hope they would be along for that so they can hear it. But if you've never done what we've done before, you don't necessarily, especially in the early days, need to be a part of backlog grooming or even pre-planning for a sprint, right? Like those types of things, we tend to put in foundational things that the business doesn't necessarily care about, right? Like SSO and security and frameworks and all the low-level stuff that I don't necessarily need, even a product owner, to really be deeply involved in those conversations. Those are just things that need to happen. If you bring in an organization that hasn't done this before, they might say like, oh, when am I going to see this? I want to see, how about we get this feature out there? Well, yeah, okay, no doubt we're going to, but that's going to be not this sprint, probably not the next one, the one after this. This is all the stuff that's around that. That's one of the pitfalls I've seen with folks that aren't familiar with this, is like, they want to be involved. They want to have they want their fingerprints on something without necessarily understanding the interdependencies that need to happen to enable the things they ask for.
And having to have those conversations, right? Like we can 100% do that. We can totally elevate all of those things to the front of the line, but it makes other things harder. And we didn't build the line in the order that we did randomly. We didn't throw dice to pick out, do we need SSO now or later? We chose it on purpose, right?
Right. And it's actually, can't believe I'm saying this, one of the nice parts about waterfall, right? Like you could actually say, all right, this first phase is literally just us getting ready for whatever the waterfall equivalent of sprint 0 is, right? Mm-hmm. Understanding your landscape, understanding everything that we need to do, and then the outcome of this set of work, right, is this. And then we start building features, and then we start doing everything else. It's actually kind of, because then in that case, they would leave you alone for 3 months and just expect, things are cool. But now you're building them into the process.
And as long as the color is green.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And a specific green.
Yeah.
I think we've talked I believe we talked in the past just about how as consultants, like if you want to do a bad job as a consultant, you go in and on day one, you're telling people how to do things differently or how they're doing it wrong. But I think the same rule kind of applies to, any employee starting a new job, or if you're moving to a new team, or if you're seeing things that are a problem, cool, then you can start to make a case for why we should do something differently. But it's not as though we're saying like, okay, you go into an organization that is moving quickly and doesn't have any issues, and they happen to have a dev team that runs agile or a business team that runs waterfall, or both are running waterfall. Like if it's working, cool, leave it alone. Like, but if it's holding some portion of the company back, or if you're falling behind in terms of the profits that you're wanting to see or the connections with customers that you want to achieve, like then you start trying to work and make those changes to see, okay, how can we move forward as a company? How can we do better demos to support faster deployments? And then you start getting into, okay, maybe Agile's a better process for us to do, or maybe we need to rework our company to focus more on products instead of projects. So it's, I think, Chad, you're saying that it depends is a bad answer or a cop-out answer. Like it is, but it's because that's the right answer. Like there aren't hard and fast rules that you should always do Agile forever and nothing else. You should always do waterfall for everything and nothing else. Like, no, you get to take it on a case-by-case basis. And the issue isn't necessarily the methodology. It's, is it working? If it's not working, then no, maybe try something else.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, and I used to see this more often, but a reluctance to involve the business at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And trying to convince them that no, if we want this to be something that IT does for the business and not something IT does to the business, then we'll probably need to involve the business. And there's a lot of benefits to that. You get people that have skin in the game. And so when you release things, launch things, you have somebody out there among the users that can explain things, defend things, understand things, and share that information.
Or Chad, like I'm thinking, like what would your like one of your current projects right now look like if you didn't understand what the business like? Oh, I'm making an application. Cool. Like
Yeah. I can't even fathom not involving business to the degree that we do these days for anything, right? Like, regardless of if you're insurance or like whatever industry you're in, the assumption that as IT professionals we're just naturally going to understand is insanity. So like the business involvement in what we do isn't even a thing I think about anymore. I would never think about not doing it. Not
I will
having
say,
them.
For folks who may be on teams that don't have a lot of involvement from the business, I've run into situations where that is the case at clients, and every single time I've found that there is at least one person on your business team who is interested in what IT is doing and just wants to get involved. So it's just even if you don't necessarily have a mandate top down that yes, these teams are going to partner together, there's always at least one person that you can just kind of use as I'm going to open the door a bit. And then that's where you get momentum and you can start to make bigger change.
Yeah. I think, the problems that we solve for people, nobody's really asking for a blog. Like, hey, build blog software for us so we can update blah, blah, blah. All right, we might not need the business as involved in that one. But nobody's asking for that anymore. They're asking
we need a calculator.
Stuff. Yeah, we need, it's just infinite complexity in what the asks are these days. And there's no way that we could be successful without embedding the business into how we do things every single day.
So how much of that kind of onboarding the business, how much of that are you involved in from a developer standpoint? What do you do to kind of assist that?
If I'm just a developer, like if my only role on the project is to just hammer out stories, honestly, maybe not a ton. Right, like, I'd rely on product owners, tech leads, everybody else to help clarify requirements, and BAs. I'd rely on those roles to help clarify requirements. If I'm just solely a developer, what I try awfully hard to do is to make sure that everyone that's literally writing code can focus on writing code. Like, I saw a stat recently, and I don't know how accurate it is, but every interruption that you give a developer costs about 23 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Every question you ask. And so if I can make a guy's day as interruption-free as possible and make myself available for questions, that makes everything move a lot faster. So as a developer, I might not be as involved in getting the business up to speed on agile practices, processes, and everything else.
Right.
As a consultant that comes in as a developer, and you see that they are not maybe involving the business as much as they should, like they're not quite getting where they need to be to really be in sync with the business and iterating through the project. Are there things you do to kind of nudge them in the right direction, help them out?
As a developer and as a consultant, nothing really special. I mean, if like I said, if my role is to write code, I want to write code, right? If my role as a consultant on a project is to write code, I want to make darn sure that I'm focused enough that I can do that effectively without interruption to whatever
Right.
degree,
But you want to
So-
write good code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
your
I mean-
primary focus is going to be what they brought you in to do.
Exactly. Yeah. If my role is slightly less defined and a little bit more ambiguous, then wherever my skill set applies, that's where I'm going to apply it.
Yeah, I think Chad, you're talking as sort of a junior developer that only knows about the code that they're looking at and don't have the 10,000 foot view or 20,000 foot view, that kind of thing, right? They're working on features and stuff like that. But
Right.
I think from this podcast, we're sort of talking about like, yeah, you're going to work on involving the business in almost everything. It's rare that we're brought in to be just a developer, like a developer.
Yeah, and I think I would say there are times when on paper we're brought in to be just a developer. Like,
Sure.
but when even if my focus is just doing development, and if I'm seeing things that are kind of impacting, here's how information comes down to me, or here are things that are worrying me about how we're deploying the stuff that I've contributed to. As a consultant, I'll generally have conversations with my manager at the client or other team members just to kind of talk about, okay, this seems like this is an issue. Have we looked at other alternatives, or why are we continuing to still follow this pattern? So we're in a unique position where we can suggest alternatives. That doesn't necessarily mean we drive the change, because we want it ultimately those kind of structural changes to be coming from the client. But we certainly are in a position to share our feedback based on what we've seen be successful at other clients. I think I do want to kind of touch on, because Kyle, when you asked like, what do you do if you're a developer and you need to work on that relationship with the business? I think it will vary significantly from, not a lot if you are a junior developer on a team of developers versus you're brought in as a developer and, oh, by the way, you're a team of one. Because I would imagine, Kyle, your experience would be very different. And I've had bits of both. So I guess I'll say, in terms of talking about, I am a developer of one and I need a relationship with a business, there are things that I've done to help strengthen that relationship. So things like, hey, you're not used to talking with a developer. We're going to have working sessions several times a week, or just like, we're just going to exchange information, where I'm basically stepping in to do some of the delivery type roles, like a BA or a PM, to start to cover that work, and then encourage the external context to start to get more comfortable with, hey, we're going to iterate. We are going to be talking a lot. I want to learn how you do your job. You're going to learn how I do my job. But is that different, Kyle, than how you've approached it?
No, you have to have the right team of people, and you have to have the right knowledge in the room. And the people that have the best knowledge of how stuff gets used are the people that use it every day. And, as a solo act, sometimes you end up kind of building that project team like, oh, I found a BA. They don't know they're a BA.
Yes.
But
But they sure are good at writing requirements.
yeah. And I need a product owner. I need someone to communicate with the stakeholders. I can't do all of this. So and maybe this is a bad term, but I would sometimes find a human shield. That's well, it was almost an interpreter. It was like, this is a person that speaks Kyle, and they also speak business at this place. And they're way more effective at communicating with their stakeholders and leadership than I am.
Right.
So I'm going to try to partner with them and make them part of my team. So there was some of that. In retrospect, there was a few projects where I would have said, we really need to scrum this thing. We need to scrum the heck out of this, which means we need to get a scrum master involved. And they're going to help us because we're going in circles. We're not like this is not going well. We're doing a lot of rework. Stuff is sliding. Like, we really need someone that knows how to do this approach that I think is going to be way more effective. Because I didn't work on huge multi-person projects and all that, like, I didn't know to say that. So we just scrambled and did what we had to do and got it done because we all had the will to do it and make it happen. But I think that, like, I can look back on projects and I can see some things I would have done differently now that might have come out if we had one of those, a person in a key role, kind of pulling that information out of the business.
Yeah.
1,000,000%. I agree. I've been on projects where I've been assigned roles that I probably shouldn't have been assigned. And it was very difficult to be a scrum master and get development work done because it's really hard to do that at the same time.
And for, as a consultant, when you're assigned something that's way outside your comfort zone, skill set, it's like, I'm not the person, I'm not a architect, that's going to be able to go. I'm not going to be able to figure out all of the minutia of this. I'm not that detail oriented. This is actually like, your network people should be looking into this. Like, if you want to performance test this thing on your network, we want them involved. And then the answer's been, well, you're going to have to do it because you're the only one. Like, no one else has time. So you're it. And then you're like, all right, let's dig in. Let's read everything.
Well, and you do your best, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
And you stretch and you grow and you get a little bit stronger and you know that I can do this if I'm forced to, but boy, wouldn't it be better if I didn't?
Yeah.
Or this was easy. This was fine. I can do this from now on.
One thing I found that with a lot of solo projects, when I would get on a multi-person project, I was like spoiled in being the sole decision maker or whatever, planner person that could just decide what they're going to do that day. And I was like, I am not a good team player. I am not good at delegating. I don't want to delegate anything because I don't want to explain. I just want to do it. It'll
take me longer to explain it to you than it'll do to do it. I'll just do it.
Yeah.
Can't do that for everything.
I'm much better in a supporting role that way. I'm good at support. I'm good at helping and ideas and getting work done. But some of that other stuff that requires really good teamwork. Yeah.
Team of one.
Yeah. I'm trying, though. Trying to get better, trying to listen more. Yeah. Working on it. The podcast has helped, I believe.
We have great ideas here.
Yes. So many.
Just to toot our own horn here.
I would say that I benefit from just the great experience that we have here, because what is it? That we have a combined 600 years of experience.
At least.
I don't know what that means, but yeah.
Right around there.
I don't think we're quite at 600.
No.
We're not forming Voltron, like so.
We'll talk about at the podcaster happy hour that we're going to have pretty soon.
There you go.
The amount of years of experience.
All right.
And
Put
I would
it on a
expect
whiteboard.
that Chad will put that together, organize it, post it. Excellent. Any parting thoughts about the podcast we just did?
Yeah, what was the title, Kyle?
It changed.
Did it?
We
Yeah.
iterated on it.
It was really long at the beginning.
It's iterating with the business.
I would say get the business involved as much as you can, and it almost never hurts to have the business involved.
Yeah.
Make a business buddy, or make a bunch.
I like that.
Form alliances and.
Well, it's not Survivor, but yeah, I mean,
Depends on the placement.
You have met on my projects.
get familiar with the business, get familiar with the people, and build a relationship such that like they're comfortable you just reaching out with questions, right?
Yeah.
And even like to your point, Kyle, even as a developer, right? Like my preference is that I'm aware of, when I wouldn't necessarily want all my developers to reach out to 20 different people to get like clarification on a given requirement. It's nice to have that focus through a funnel so that everybody's kind of on the same page. But, tactically, if you're looking for data or if you're looking for something, if you have relationships with folks, it sure is helpful to be able to use those. And it's more effective than some weird methodology or some process or whatever, right? Like those are the things that get stuff done. Process is great, but it's process, and who gets excited about that?
Post a
delivery
question to the
consultants.
board.
You can't go to happy hour with a process.
My parting thought is Henry Ford, when he invented the Model T, said, if I had asked the people what they wanted, the answer would have been faster horses. And I think don't listen to him. That was a very specific thing. I've heard that come up before as a way of kind of like, we can handle this. It's like, I think in most cases, partnering with the business and asking people what they want is a good idea.
Elle, you didn't give your parting thought yet.
I liked your parting thoughts. I don't want to sully them with some rambling thought. So I'm going to leave it with your guys's.
Peter, did you give one?
I did.
Excellent. I'll have to listen to the podcast.
You should listen to the podcast. That's really good.
Next time. And with that, I think we'll say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye,
Goodbye,
everybody.
everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.